Hey everyone, today is Thursday, February 15th, and it's been a while since I made a GME video, but with recent developments, I figured I'd share them. Might interest you, might give you some additional insight about which way the stock might go over the next couple of months. So to start the video, just wanted to talk really quickly about VOEX. VOEX is this pink line that you see on the screen. Now, I'll explain how it works in 30 seconds, and then we'll jump right into the data. So there are three zones in the VOEX graph. There's the inhibition zone. Whenever the pink line is up above the upper black line right here, that indicates bullish price action. We should expect future bullish price action. As you can see here, Meta VOEX is spending a lot of time in the inhibition zone, and price is performing very well. We also have the stability zone, which is in here. When a stock, when VOEX is in the stability zone, we also expect bullish price action as stable stocks tend to rise. And VOEX is measuring a stock stability. So for example, right here, when VOEX is spending a nice amount of time in the stability zone, which is this middle area, the stock performed very well. We can see Meta went from about 96 all the way to about 243 while VOEX was in the stability zone. The third zone is the propagation zone, which is anything under the lower black line. And when VOEX is in the propagation zone, that says that the stock is very unstable and bearish price action should be expected. And sure enough, you can see VOEX spending a lot of time in the propagation zone right before this huge collapse on Meta from 323 down to 195. And then for a while, VOEX was in the inhibition zone and the stock just getting hammered. Stock kept getting hammered to the downside until VOEX finally lifted into stability, and then we had this bullish price action. So the cheat sheet, the stability zone in between the two black lines, VOEX in the stable zone means VOEX is between the two horizontal lines. This means that the stock is moving in a stabilizing manner, usually up. In general, when VOEX is stable, you'll see price move higher. We have the inhibition zone, that's the upper black line. VOEX moving into the inhibition zone is initially a bullish finding, but also demonstrates that the most recent price action is being worked against, usually resolves on the downside, but that's only once VOEX leaves the inhibition zone. So initially, VOEX entering the inhibition zone is bullish. Not sure why that's there. But once it exits, we would expect bearish price action. And finally, the propagation zone, VOEX falling into the propagation zone is usually indicative of persistent and continued decline in price. VOEX falling below the lower black line is very bearish. Just another quick example would be NVIDIA. Take a look at NVIDIA. You'll see that VOEX was in the stability zone for all this time. And during that period of time, the stock was able to move from 158 or so all the way up to 429. And then after that is when things got a little wonky. VOEX spent a lot of time in the inhibition zone, especially lately. VOEX has been spending plenty of time in the inhibition zone as NVIDIA soared from 475 all the way up to 739. Why am I telling you all of this? Because when we look at GME, we'll notice a phenomenon of a pretty unstable VOEX. So you can see all these spiky movements up and down. When VOEX did move into the inhibition zone, that's when all of GME's rallies started. So as we all know, GME had a lot of strong rallies to the upside. But then every time VOEX exited the inhibition zone, the rallies were always given back. All the gains from the rallies were given back. Over here, VOEX moves into the inhibition zone, nice move higher, and then once VOEX exits the inhibition zone, price comes down. VOEX moves back into the inhibition zone, price goes higher. But once VOEX exits the inhibition zone, as you can see, price goes down. So on and so forth throughout this entire GME saga. And you'll notice that GME barely spent any considerable amount of time in the stability zone. This is up to 2023, so this is not a date. But in general, we don't see that stabilizing VOEX pattern that we see in NVIDIA right here and that we see in Meta right here, stabilizing patterns. And because GME is so highly unstable, that's why we've seen the stock been in a pretty strong downtrend ever since, I would say probably back to June of 2021. It's been a steady downtrend with a lot of pops higher. The reason why I'm making this video is because if you look at current data today, for the first time ever since we started tracking GME, we are finally starting to see VOEX stabilize. This is the longest and healthiest period that VOEX has stayed in the stability zone for ever since pre-January 2021. When I see something like this, it gets me really excited, especially if it's in a stock that I hold, because it tells me that a stock that has been wildly unstable and erratic over the past 3 years is finally finding stability. And as you can see from Meta and NVIDIA, when VOEX finally does stabilize here, spent a lot of time in the propagation zone. Once it stabilized, the stock went on a bull run from 11.4, uh, from 11.22, right? So November 22nd, all the way up to May 2023, stock was on a VOEX in the stability zone. Same thing for NVIDIA from December 2022 all the way to May 2023. The stock moved really well to the upside while VOEX was in the stability zone. And now, for the first time, again in 3 years, we are finally seeing VOEX start to stabilize. Stabilizing VOEX is a very bullish, forward-looking indicator for a stock. So that's purely the reason why I'm making this video, is just to show that there's been a recent significantly bullish development in the fact that VOEX is showing that stability has finally returned to GME. Stable stocks tend to rise, unstable stocks tend to fall, and now that GME VOEX is showing stability, we can finally have a forward-looking bullish outlook on GME for the first time in a very long time. Just moving on to the triggers, and LDPS, which is the coloring of the candles, showing good liquidity or bad liquidity. Obviously, here there was some really bad liquidity. The liquidity during the time that VOEX has been spending in the stability zone, we can see that even though price hasn't reacted just yet, which is fine, it can take a while after VOEX stabilizes for price to see the direct results of that stabilization. But you can see that liquidity has been getting better. And so if the stock can break above the daily trigger at 1467, tried to break above here but got pulled back down. You can see how close the hourly trigger got to crossing above the daily trigger. It knocked it down just in time with that CPI print. But now the stock is already pushing back up to the daily trigger. So if GME can get above the daily trigger and the hourly trigger can cross above the daily trigger, then we would expect to move higher to 1613. Price can break above the weekly trigger, you can expect a squeeze higher to 21. And if price can break above the monthly trigger, that will initiate the next big squeeze for GME. So hope the video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you didn't, you don't have to. And let's see what the future beholds for GME.